So, when you picture the God of the Hebrew Bible, what image pops into your head? A distant, thundering voice from the clouds? Maybe a strict lawgiver? Well, today, we're going to peel back thousands of years of history and interpretation to get a look at the raw, complex, and honestly, often surprising character of the God of ancient Israel. All right, let's get into it.
You know, the texts from back then, they don't give us a simple picture at all. Was this God a fierce warrior, a loving parent, a supreme king, a righteous judge? And the answer, well, as we're about to see, it's a fascinating and powerful all of the above.
All right, so let's kick things off with the image most of us probably know best. God as a divine warrior. This is an image of just, incredible power, and it was born out of a really dangerous world. I mean, the biblical texts are just packed with these really intense military-style titles. Yahweh is called a man of war, mighty in battle, and maybe most famously, Yahweh of armies. There was even an ancient collection of poems, which is now lost, called the Scroll of the Wars of Yahweh. And look, this wasn't just some poetic metaphor. This was seen as a core piece of who this God was.
But here's what's super interesting. Israel was not alone in this, not by a long shot. In the ancient Near East, just surviving day to day was a constant fight. So every single culture, from Mesopotamia all the way to Egypt, had a warrior god they could call on. Having a god who would fight for you wasn't just a nice idea, it was absolutely essential for survival.
Okay, but this whole God of War thing, it wasn't just about human armies clashing on a battlefield. No, this was playing out on a cosmic scale, in this epic, ongoing struggle against the forces of chaos itself. Academics have a cool name for this, Chaoskampf. It's German and it literally means struggle against chaos. And it perfectly describes this myth that you see everywhere in the ancient world, where a divine hero has to fight some primordial monster, usually a giant sea serpent or a dragon, to bring order to the whole universe.
And here we go. This is a perfect example of that Chaoskampf idea. I mean, just look at this Assyrian relief. You can almost feel the energy, right? The divine hero with his lightning bolts taking on this monstrous beast. This whole idea, order versus chaos, it was the blockbuster story of its time. And it just keeps popping up. Check out this Mesopotamian seal. And what do you see? A multi-headed dragon. That's not random. That seven-headed monster was the go-to symbol for total uncontrollable chaos. And again, here it is, the same seven-headed beast surrounded by all these other symbols of chaos. You just couldn't get away from this imagery. Like I said, it was the biggest story going.
So here's the takeaway. The ancient Israelites took this incredibly popular, powerful story, and they used that exact same imagery to talk about their God, Yahweh. They cast him as the ultimate champion who crushes cosmic monsters like Leviathan and the Tannin dragon to bring order and safety to the world.
Okay, but just when you think you've got this figured out, God is this fierce cosmic warrior. The whole story just takes a massive turn, because there's this other side to this God, one that's totally different and incredibly personal.
And this right here, this is the core tension we're talking about. On one hand, you've got the scary warrior, mighty in battle, lord of armies. But on the other hand, you get titles like Father of the Fatherless, Compassionate, Your Creator. For a nation's main god to be talked about with such caring, family-oriented language, that was a big deal. So what gives? How do these two totally opposite portraits fit together?
And it gets even more startling, honestly. That same part of Isaiah that calls Yahweh a man of war, just one verse later, it compares God to a woman screaming in childbirth. That's not just fatherly. That's raw, maternal, life-giving agony.
To really get why this compassionate side was so important, you have to understand just how brutal life could be. Just look at this. This is a real footprint of a child from ancient Syria, preserved in clay. And the text on it? It says their own parents sold them into slavery to cover a debt. I mean, wow. That's the kind of world these people lived in. A world where the most vulnerable needed a protector, badly.
And that brings us to this really key idea, the Redeemer. In Hebrew, the word is goel. And this wasn't some abstract religious term. It was a real-life family duty. The goel was your closest male relative, and he was bound by honor to buy you back if you ever got sold into slavery. So when the Bible calls God a goel, it's tapping into that powerful personal idea of a family member who is sworn to save you no matter what.
So back to our big question. How do you square the circle? The warrior god and the caring parent. Well, the ancient world had one role, one metaphor,
that actually tied it all together perfectly. The ideal king.
Think about it. A perfect king had to be a warrior, right? To protect his nation from enemies. But he also had to be like a father to his people, showing compassion. And, this is the big one, he had to be a judge who made sure the most powerless people got justice. The widow, the orphan, the poor. The warrior and the parent all in one.
You see, the king wasn't just some politician. He was a sacred figure. He was the bridge, the main connection point between humanity and the divine. His whole job was to bring God's justice and order down to earth. And this little quote from Deuteronomy, it nails it. For justice is of God. Human judges were supposed to be fair because real justice didn't come from them. It came from God. They were just supposed to be the delivery system.
So this really rich, complex idea of a divine king, part warrior, part parent, all about justice, and ended up having this huge impact that we still feel today in our own ideas about ethics and leadership.
But there's always a but, isn't there? It's a great ideal, but what happens in the real world when the kings and judges, the very people who are supposed to bring that justice, are actually corrupt themselves?
And that's where the biblical prophets come in. People like Isaiah and Micah who had the guts to speak truth to power. Their job was to call out those corrupt rulers, not based on some human law, but based on the divine standard of the true king, who demanded justice for the vulnerable.
So where does all this lead? What's the ultimate vision for this divine king? It's incredible. The final act of this warrior king isn't more war, it's the end of all war. The swords become farming tools. The whole story that started with a god of war comes full circle, ending with a God of total global peace.
So that leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. This ancient picture of God is so complex, right? It's terrifying power mixed with tender compassion, the warrior and the parent all rolled into one ideal king. So how does that ancient, complicated idea of power still echo today in what we expect from our leaders, what we mean by justice, and how we even think about building a better world?